Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. Tonight's class is, of course, in the merit of all the Jewish people, especially in the land of Israel, and those on the front lines, those that need to be rescued, and those that need a recovery. God should give them everything that they need. Just as a reminder, these classes are available for dedication. If you would like to dedicate a class in honor or merit of somebody, please put a comment, send us a message. We would be happy to accommodate you. We really appreciate all these sponsorships that we've been getting, and they allow us to continue these classes. So thank you very much. And let's jump right in. So we said we're going to continue studying Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers, that we studied during these weeks between Passover and Shavuos, and we're also continue, as is the custom, to continue studying them throughout the summer until Rosh Hashanah. So let's get into it. The Mishnah we're discussing today, I believe, is chapter 2, Mishnah 1. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, who was Rabbi Judah, the prince, he is actually the compiler of the Mishnah. If you follow our Tuesday classes, shameless plug, that was, I believe, our first class. You could go back in you could check it out on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. I think it's on all three platforms that we generally use. You could go and see that class about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and how important person he was in establishing the Mishnah. Okay, so he says as follows: which is the right path for a person to choose for themselves? Whatever is harmonious for the one who does it and earns them praise from mankind. Okay, so again, he says, what is the proper path to choose? The proper path is the one that is good for the one who does it, and the one he earns praise from people. So we have so he's saying that is the best path, something that's good for you and good for other people as well. So what does that mean? What does that mean practically? So one of the commentaries, Rabbi Ovadia of Bartanura, famous Italian rabbi, who wrote a commentary on the Mishnah, says as follows: what is the best? What is the best way? Is the middle road? What is the middle road? For example, he says somebody is overly miserly, and he does not give money to charity. While at the one hand, he may enjoy the money that he's saving. However, nobody will appreciate him. And if somebody is irresponsible and overly generous, where to the point that they have they will not have any money left for themselves, obviously people around them will be very thrilled, but he will end up being miserable himself. So the best way is to give in the middle path. So that is what the Mishnah and the commentary. So again, we're saying that we should follow the middle path. Why? Because it's important to not just do something that's just good for you, but it has to be good for others as well. So first of all, we have a couple questions. The first question is, why does it matter? Why is the Mishnah of Pirkei Avos, which we talked about last week, is a book of ethics and a book that is beyond the letter of the law. It is not the law. Right? The laws are in the other tractates of the Mishnah, but this is specifically beyond the letter of the law, meaning this is something that is, putting yourself aside for and following, a higher moral code. As we said last time, it means kind of looking deeper into the Torah. That's the first question. So if you're saying this is about ethics, so why don't we just say, what do you mean, what's the path? Look in Code of Jewish Law and see, okay, how much charity should I give at this time? How do I treat others? How do I treat myself? How much time should I put into Torah study, etc.? That's the first question. The second question is, why does it matter what other people think? If it's something that's correct and moral, if it's moral to not give charity, then we shouldn't give charity. If it's moral to give charity, then we should give it. It shouldn't be relevant what is good for me and good for others. What does that really matter if we're talking about a book of morals and ethics? Okay. So the first way we could look at this is there are two general ways of serving God. Okay. We know that obviously the Torah is uh, the Torah is true and the Torah is the proper path. But even within that, there is you could say there's the straight path, which is the path that the Mishnah chooses, and then there's kind of a crooked path. It doesn't mean it's bad or wrong, but it could be that it's kind of a windy path. It is not the straight path. So what are the two general ways of serving God? The first way is focusing on oneself, right? And particularly this applies the most in the study of Torah. If a person is just focusing on study Torah, as it says in the Pirkei Avos later, it says one who says I only have Torah, even Torah he doesn't have, right? That's kind of a this approach is good for a person themselves. They'll become a big scholar. They'll become extremely learned. They'll not even become pious because of their studies. And the other one is studying. Focusing on helping others. And according to Jewish law, there's a time that has to be put aside for Torah study, but as other times that a person will focus. This second way of serving God, this person will focus on doing and helping for others. So this is this is one of the age-old Jewish questions, right? Which one do we focus on? Do we focus on ourselves? Do we focus on others? And they're both legitimate paths. But our Mishnah is going to say which one is the straighter path, which one is the more direct path. So we see even amongst the great rabbis this debate. We'll give a couple of examples of some rabbis who felt. We'll focus first. One famous rabbi who was very focused on himself. And again, we're not using that in a derogatory sense, but that he was extremely focused on Torah study. Rabbi Eliezer said, this is from the Talmud, Yevamos 63b, a story about Ben Azai. His name, by the way, was Shimon ben Azai. At that time, there were many people rabbis who were named Shimon, so they ended up just calling them by their father's name. So there's Ben Azai, Ben Nanas, and a few others, and they became known as their, I guess you call it a surname of sorts, because they all were named Shimon. His name was Shimon, the son of Azai. So here's the story. Talmud Yevamos 63b. Rabbi Eliezer said, one who does not engage in having children is likened to one who engages in bloodshed. Rabbi Yaakov taught, it is as if they diminish God's image. Very strong words. Ben Azai said, it is as if they engage in bloodshed and diminish God's name. So Ben Azai takes the most extreme approach. Rabbi Eliezer said, somebody who doesn't have children, it's as if they engage in bloodshed. His colleague, Rabbi Yaakov, said, it's as if they diminish God's image. And Rabbi Ben Azai, he says, it's both. So the rabbis in the study hall said, excuse me, Ben Azai, some preach and some practice. Some practice but do not preach. And you do not practice what you preach, because Ben Azai himself was not married. So how could it be that Ben Azai is saying, this is the worst thing that you could do? So he said, what can I do? My soul yearns for Torah. The world will be perpetuated, thank you, by others. So the Ben Azai had this. He was so devoted to Torah study. There's a debate in the Talmud whether he actually was married and got divorced because he could not handle having a family life in order to focus on study Torah, or he never got married. Either way, however you understand it, he himself was totally dedicated to study Torah, and basically he said, "I'm in love with Torah. I have no room for love of a family." So, a very interesting character who's quoted throughout the Talmud, a very important sage, and he's quoted again also in Pirkei Avos. So we have this. That's one approach. That's approach number one. Approach number two. And by the way, those rabbis were definitely the exception. I just want to make that clear. The rabbis who were so dedicated to Torah, they had no time for anything else. Very, very rare. Ben Azai, obviously, the example we gave. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who we celebrate on Lag BaOmer this Sunday. Also similar, he was married, he had children, but he lived in a cave for about 13 years because he and only studied Torah, to the point where he wouldn't even pray. That's how dedicated he was to the study of Torah. We could discuss that maybe another time, but that was definitely maybe one or two rabbis of every generation who were engaged in that kind of activity. Okay. The second approach is we have another rabbi. His name was Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, a very famous rabbi in the Mishnah, who very few legal teachings are said about him. However, there are many, many stories about his good deeds because he was engaged. That's what he did. He helped people. So let's get into some stories about Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. The first story is when Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa would pray for the sick, he would say, "This one will live and this one will die." When asked how he knows, he responded that if his prayer flows smoothly, meaning like he didn't stutter or anything like that, he knows it is accepted in heaven. If not, he knows the person will succumb. So he was always praying for people, and he knew that if he prayed for somebody and he said the prayer correctly, and he knew that it meant God accepted his prayer. If not, he knew that it was too late. Another story. This one is one of my favorites. The sages taught. Talmud, Brachas 33a. Our sages taught. It happened once that a snake was harming people. Some sort of venomous snake. And they informed Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. So he said, "Show me the snake's burrow." They showed him where the snake was. He put his foot over the snake's hole, and the snake bit him and died. So he put the snake over his shoulder and he brought it to the study hall. And he said, "Look, my children," he said to the students, "the snake does not kill. It is the sin that kills." At that time it was said, "Woe is one bitten by a snake, and woe is the snake that bites Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa." So this is a classic story of the snake bit him and the snake died. So we see again, this is a tremendous his piety, and we see also his willingness to help others. He was willing to put himself aside and in order to go save a community that was being ravaged by this snake. And obviously, like we said, also his prayers. Another story is an amazing story that at one time Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa was I believe he was very poor. And somebody, a traveler, passed by his house, and they left chickens in front of his house, and they were abandoned. So Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa's wife found them and took care of them. And Rabbi Chanina told her, "You're not allowed to use these chickens. You can't eat their eggs. You can't eat their eggs because they are not ours. It doesn't belong to us. We found these. This belongs to the person who abandoned them, or who forgot them." So what happened was the chicken would lay eggs and they wouldn't eat the eggs. So they would just hatch more and more and more eggs to the point that it was way too much. There was so many chickens, they couldn't handle it. So he took them and he sold them, and he bought the money with the money that he sold the chickens, he bought goats. So one time the man who lost the chickens passed by and said to somebody who was his travel companion, he said, "You know what? I left my chickens here once. A few years ago, I was here and I left my chickens right in the front of his house." Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa heard this and he said to him, "Do you have a sign by which to identify them?" And he said yes. And he gave him the sign, and he took the goats. So again, we see that even though he was a great sage and he was a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the great leader of the Jewish people at the end of the Second Temple period, during the destruction of the Second Temple period, nonetheless, the way he served God was by engaging and helping people, like we see with these few stories. There are more, but those are some amazing stories. This debate, though, goes back even farther, right? Should we be involved in helping ourselves or helping others, focusing on ourselves or focusing on others? We know the story of the spies, which we're going to read in a few weeks, the story of the spies. After Shavuos, we'll read the story of the spies of Moses wanted to send spies to the land of Israel, and the spies did not want to go into the land of Israel because they said, if we go into the land, we're going to have to be involved with society. When they lived in the desert, their clothes were washed by the clouds of glory. Manna came from heaven. They had the well of Miriam. Everything was taken care of for them. Moses was teaching them. God spoke to Moses every week. They had a new Torah. It was new laws from the Torah, new mitzvahs. It was exciting. But if they go into the land of Israel, they're going to have to work the land. They're going to have to engage in society. They're going to have to go into business. They're going to have to plow, reap. So it's a lot of work. And obviously, if you're working, you're not going to study Torah as much as you could. So the spies made the choice. They said, we're going to say that the land is bad, and try to convince the Jewish people to stay in the desert, stay with this spiritual oasis that we've created. So, and obviously they were punished for that. So we see that this is an age-old question. So what is the perfect path that Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rabbi Judah Prince says is the proper path? He says you can't do either one. The straight path is both. Something that's good for yourself and makes others appreciate it. That we have to find this approach of what is the best way that we could do something that helps us and helps another. And really, if you think about it, this is really getting to the essence of what the Torah is. The Torah is not a book of, just personal improvement, but it's really about improving the entire world. So even when a person studies Torah, if they study Torah on a very superficial level, yes, they could just, try to become a intellectual and a scholar. But if you really study Torah, you'll see how everything that you're studying is making you into a person that now could go and illuminate the world. Kind of like a candle. If you light a candle, yes, the candle will now be engulfed in flame. However, the light will automatically shine to others without any additional effort. And that is the true way to serve God. Okay, let's do one more Mishnah. The next Mishnah we're going to study is Mishnah. Let's see what we got here. We have Mishnah 3 from the same chapter. I believe it's chapter 2. As follows. The Mishnah says, "Be careful with the government authorities. For they," or authorities is the proper translation, "for they befriend a person only for their own needs. They appear to be friends, but when it is beneficial to them, but they do not stand by a person at the time of his distress." So this is an age-old problem. People falling out of favor with politics. So let's see what the commentaries say about this. The commentaries say, Rabbi Vaidi Bartanura, he says that you who are involved with communal affairs, although you need to confide in the authorities in order to do your job, be very careful, be very wary, because they're really in it for themselves. Now, this is obviously, when it comes to these authorities, this is an old Jewish practice, right? Joseph saved Egypt from famine, and he used his ability with the Pharaoh to bring and save his family from famine. So that's obviously a time that it worked for him, but then turn around, right? And the Torah tells us that Pharaoh forgot Joseph and enslaved the Jewish people. So we see how it worked out, and then they weren't careful, and it didn't work out. Another more recent, not very recent, obviously, but in the time of the Spanish Inquisition, Isaac Abarbanel, who was the finance minister for Spain, was obviously, he was not just a politically connected, but he was also a tremendous scholar. His commentaries on the Torah are studied until this day, and he was actually a representative of the Queen of Spain. And when the Inquisition happened, that they expelled all the Jewish people from Spain, he tried to appeal, and the king said, "Well, really, it's the Queen who is the religious fanatic," and this was the Queen who he had actually was her representative in financial affairs, and she wasn't willing to. So we see here how, again, the similar idea of how government officials don't always work out to the best, and in some ways, and we see in modern politics, we see very similar things of how, those people will promise things, and then when it doesn't work out for them, they'll take it back. Whether it's a geopolitical or domestic politics, we see this all the time. Not that I know much about politics, but we do see these things. So the question is, how is this relevant to everybody? Very few people. We gave examples of Joseph, then Isaac Abarbanel. I believe actually I saw somewhere it's actually pronounced Abravanel, however you pronounce it. We see how these are very unique individuals. Even today, there are people involved in governmental advocacy, etc. Most of us are not. So the question is, how could a Mishnah about ethics be dictated or relevant only to a few people? And as well, seemingly this is good advice, but how is this related to Torah? Again, the ethics of our fathers are supposed to be above the letter of the law. what's the letter of the law here? So the truth is that we can interpret this in a way that is important to serving God. That there is, we know that the body is considered a small city ruled over by two different people, or being fought over by our good inclination and our bad inclination. And the question is that we have these authorities that affect us. Who are the authorities? They're our intellectual faculties and our emotional capabilities. And these authorities are the things that bring us to do good things or sometimes bad things. As our sages say, the eye sees, the heart desires, and the body commits to transgression. So in other words, the reason why we do things is because we get emotionally attached to something or intellectually convinced of something. And that's why we do things that are not good for us, that are against what God wants from us. So so one might think, okay, well, if that's the case, then don't listen to anything. Don't use my intellect or my emotions in my service of God at all. But we see that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, be wary. Not don't engage in the political process or don't engage with authority. The Mishnah says, don't be wary, because they don't always work out for you. And this is what the Torah is telling us when it comes to our mind and our heart, our intellect and our emotions, is that we shouldn't get too caught up with them, because they might be they're not going to always work out. Sometimes our emotions and our intellect will tell us to do things that are inappropriate. However, it's not that we should abandon them. We shouldn't abandon the political process in the case of the simple meaning of the Mishnah, but in this deeper way, we shouldn't abandon our intellect and our emotions. Our intellect and our emotions could be very useful in the service of God. We can understand Torah. We can understand why we want to serve God. We could become emotionally attached to God. Those are very good things. However, we got to be wary. Don't make it all about the emotion. Don't make it all about how you're convinced of something. You have to be moral because God told you to do something. And we see that both of these Mishnahs are similar ideas about this balance, finding this balancing act of, whether it's the balancing act of like we just said, don't abandon your emotions, or don't follow them either. The same thing, we said earlier about the balancing act of, we got to find the way that we could please ourselves and please others as well. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good Shabbos. You could put a comment in the comment section if you want to say something, and we will read it when we have a chance. And thank you very much for joining. And God willing, we will see you next week.